Once upon a time on a Monday in early August, several years ago, Toa's the chief engineer of a design and construction firm. My job required me to travel out of town several times a month when problems arose. This week was no exception, and my flight left Hartsfield-Jackson at 7:21 a.m. the next day. Given the traffic in Atlanta, I would have to get up around 4 a.m., so I left work early Monday afternoon and headed home. Reagan, "I'm home," I called, entering the kitchen. Her car was in the garage, but she didn't answer my greeting, so I went upstairs. There was a shower in the adjoining bathroom behind our bedroom, and she was there. When she came out, we went to lunch together in a cafe. Work in Baton Rouge was, as I expected, a complete mess, and I spent all of Tuesday afternoon and all of the evening plus half a day on Wednesday helping to get things back on track. I think Etherly, our local project manager, learned something along the way, but we'll be watching him more closely in the future. Wednesday afternoon, I raced back down I-10 to a meeting about our work in New Orleans. Mary Jabholsky, whom I had helped train in Atlanta a few years earlier, was now the construction manager for a project in Orleans and was due to go on maternity leave in another month or two. So because she was a friend of mine and because of her upcoming absence, I kept a close eye on her project to make sure everything was documented so that the person replacing her would have clear instructions on what needed to be done. As I expected, Mary Jo was fine. So after dinner with Mary Jo and Ozzy, her husband, on Wednesday night and a planning meeting with her and her staff early Thursday morning, I made it to Louis Armstrong for my flight home, and then fought through Atlanta traffic to arrive at his office by 1:45. I reported to Mr. Strickland, my boss, about the situation with the Baton Rouge project, my recommendations for improving the supervision of the on-site team, and my good report on the work that Mary Jo and her team were doing in New Orleans. He agreed with my suggestions for Baton Rouge, asked a few questions about the change in management when Mary Jo went on vacation, and then told me to rest the rest of the day after I submitted my expense report. Once in my office, I quickly finished it and said, "Done." I reached for my phone to text Reagan that I would be home early before heading out the door. That's when Ethan Gardner, my best friend since third grade and colleague for the past 6 years, walked into my office and closed the door behind him. "Hello, Trent. How was your trip?" "Long, but productive. Etherly will be able to keep order in Baton Rouge until the end of the draft if he keeps a little better eye on his leaders. But now I'm tired and enough is enough. So even though I love you like a brother, Ethan, Mr. Strickland told me to get out of here." At these words, his face darkened, so I explained with a laugh, "No, he didn't fire me. I just had so many hours on the trip helping them clean up that Mr. Strickland told me to take the rest of the day off to try and stay in the good graces of all you accounting folks. So I'm going to run to the store, buy some flowers and a bottle of wine, and be in a good mood for her when Reagan gets home. Everything related to work can wait until tomorrow." To my surprise, Ethan raised his hand and said quite decisively, "Trent, stop. It's not about work. I'm so sorry, buddy, but I really need to talk to you now. This is, well, about Reagan." She. "What? What's wrong with Reagan?" Fear pierced my heart. Something happened to her, and no one could contact me because I was on the damn plane. But why hasn't anyone called me since then? Because I interrupted him, he stammered, "Trent, she cheated while you were traveling." Anger lit my face as I looked at the guy I had almost always considered my best friend. Reagan told me that in college and in later years, she was a real free spirit and enjoyed sex whenever and wherever she could get it. But when we got more serious and started talking about living together, she said those days were behind her. She went to see a therapist for a while and decided to settle down and start a family. By committing herself to me, she had definitely left her carefree days behind her. It's not funny, Ethan. It's not funny at all, and I don't appreciate it. I think you better get out of here and really look into our friendship before you set foot in my office again." His face looked pained as he replied, I know it's not funny, Trent, and I hate to tell you more than you know, but well, I really think it's true. See, I heard it from Jake Campbell, who heard it from his friend Clay, who heard it from his friend. Clay's friend was her lover. From what she accidentally told him later, he wasn't the only one she cheated with, which is why he didn't keep it a secret. He was furious that she was cheating on him. I knew it wasn't true, that it couldn't be true. That's why I was so angry that I was ready to rip Ethan's head off for falling for such a stupid joke. However, I knew my wife much better than Ethan did, and so my anger turned to others who spread such lies and to the nameless asshole who started them. Come to think of it, I didn't let Ethan down either. In fact, I was doubly angry that my supposed best friend was the one helping them spread such crap. Ethan, I'm going to tell you this once. It is not true. Not a word of it, and if you ever, and I mean ever, say a word of it again, I'll beat the crap out of you. Now you better get out of here before I decide to do it anyway. Ethan was about 170 centimeters tall and weighed 70 kilograms, if that. He was always a skinny kid, a typical nerd, so he knew that at my height, I could do it if I wanted to. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders as he looked down at the ground and slowly shook his head. He looked at me and I saw the pain in his eyes as he said, "Trent, I'm really sorry. We've been best friends for a long, long time, so you know I would never want to hurt you, but I really think that if I don't tell you, I'll hurt you a lot more in the long run. And buddy, you know I know you well enough to know that's how you'd react. You've always had a short temper. How many times did I have to intervene to calm you down, to keep you from getting punished or worse in high school? Trent, I wouldn't tell you this, any of this, if I didn't think it was true. I'm leaving, but I'm here. You may not believe me, but here is the name of the investigator my cousin hired when he thought his wife was cheating on him. This lady is good, and if she tells you that Reagan is having an affair, well, you'll know it's true. I took a deep breath and held it for a moment, wanting the blood pulsing in my temples to calm down a little. I'm not sure if it worked, but it helped clear my thoughts and put things into better perspective. Ethan was right. We've been best friends since his family moved to our block when we were little, and we've been close ever since. We were both smart. I was the valedictorian of our high school class in the North Georgia mountains, second only to him, but he was the level-headed nerd who kept us out of trouble whenever he could, while I was the hot-tempered jock who physically helped we went through several troubles when his efforts were unsuccessful. We went to different colleges. I went to engineering, majoring in construction management at Tech, and he majored in accounting at UGA. Over time, I matured a lot without him to help me manage my temperament, although I must admit that a few extra bumps along the way without his guidance helped the process. When I heard about an opening in my firm's accounting department, I let him know how much I liked the firm. To my surprise, he applied and I put in a good word for him, so we worked together for the last 6 years, including the entire time Reagan, and I dated before getting married almost 5 years earlier. Looking back, I realized that although I didn't believe for a minute that his story was true, Ethan must have been led to believe that it was true and that he was telling me to protect me and not to intentionally hurt me. Exhaling slowly, I asked, "Your cousin's wife, was she cheating on him?" "Oh yeah, and Miss Hightower got what she deserved." "What happened to her?" Ethan winced. "He divorced her stinking ass, but still has to see her twice a week when they swap kids. He loves these kids and will do anything to protect them, which is a damn good thing because he hates her so much that he would probably kill her and happily go to death row otherwise. I'm so sorry, buddy." He left my office, answered the phone, and closed the door behind him. This left me alone with his crazy accusations and what he said about his cousin. I felt sorry for the guy who had a woman he loved and trusted, who came out and did this to him. However, without knowing the circumstances, most of my sympathy was for the children. They didn't choose their parents or the mess they were born into. The reason was that Reagan and I were discussing the possibility of expanding our family in the near future. We wanted a boy and a girl if the genetic odds were in our favor, but we were considering three if we had matching chromosomes on the first two tries. I sat at my desk for a couple of minutes, staring at the door, trying to calm myself before gathering my things and heading out. I walked home to see my wife, trying to get everything Ethan said out of my head. Unfortunately, the seed he had planted was left there to fester, refusing to be forgotten as I made my way to the interstate to return home. No, I didn't believe it for a minute. In fact, I categorically refused to believe it and would have found it all funny if it weren't so serious. As I drove north on I-75 toward my exit, I considered telling Reagan about the stupidity, but something stopped me. Even though I was sure it wasn't true, there was no reason to make her angry because people, including Ethan, were telling such terrible lies about her. After a quick stop at the grocery store, I kept my mouth shut. Reagan ran into my arms as I walked into the kitchen from the garage. "You're back early," I said, but that was all I could get out as our lips touched, and we tried to catch up on Tuesday morning. When we parted, she nodded. "I thought you'd come home early, so I've been working late the last 2 nights. Today, I left early to greet you. God, I missed you so much. Trent." I sat up in bed, trying to read my book, but the words on the page refused to register with my brain. My thoughts were about my wife and the incredible story my best friend told me. Despite all the love that Reagan showed me on the Monday before my trip and today after I returned home, I knew that the reports he received were false and that I had to prove it to him or else it would have jeopardized our friendship even more than his supposed warning. I went to bed that night, still trying to figure out what to do. But on Friday morning, while driving to work, it dawned on me. I would contact the private investigator that Ethan recommended. However, I wouldn't call her to force her to prove that Reagan cheated on me. No, still not believing it. I would ask the lady to prove that Reagan didn't do it. I called Donna Hightower's office on Friday morning and made the first available appointment for Monday afternoon. It was downtown, so I gave myself a little extra time and walked into the office at about 10 minutes to 2. After working a good job for several years before marrying Reagan, I had a sizable investment account in my name, which allowed me to surprise her with gifts or trips from time to time without her knowledge. This time, I would use some of the funds to hire an investigator, and Reagan would never find out about this stupid rumor once Hightower proved it to be false. At 2 o'clock, the secretary called me and showed me to a conference room just down the hall, where a rather statuesque black woman, dressed in pressed black trousers, an expensive white blouse, and a red scarf, stood up from the table to greet me as the young lady closed the door behind me. "Good afternoon, Mr. Gerio. Welcome to Hightower Private Investigations. I'm Donna Hightower. How can we help you?" She was tall and very well built. Her handshake was firm, too, leading me to believe that she had been keeping herself in great shape since she left Apt several years earlier. According to her firm's website, from her online biography, I deduced that she was in her early 50s, although she seemed younger to me personally. She had a warm smile, but her eyes studied me the entire time, as I suspected, picking up on my body language and whether I was secretly carrying a child. "Hello, Miss Hightower. I'm Trent Gerio, and I appreciate you meeting with me on such short notice. My problem is relatively simple. On average, I travel 2 or 3 times a month, usually for 1 or 2 nights. As a result, someone made up a story about my wife cheating on me. I want you to investigate and prove that this is not true." Without any expression, she began to ask me questions, and over the next short time, I told her everything I knew about the case, and a lot about Reagan. All this made me realize that the problem may not be as simple as I thought. Her questions were insightful, and she asked a series of follow-up questions to clarify or obtain additional information, while making brief notes along the way, especially about Reagan's past sex life, both before the start of our relationship and about our life together. I felt empty when she finally put down her pen and said, "Thank you for this information, Mr. Gerio. according to the client information sheet you filled out before coming. You have a bachelor's and master's degrees in engineering from Georgia Tech. How familiar are you with philosophy and our legal system, and, more specifically, the burden of proof? This was not the question I expected. I took an introductory philosophy course as an undergrad and was a witness in a couple of court cases with my firm. But as for the details and focus of your question, no, not really. She nodded. You turned to me with a specific request to prove that your wife did not have an affair. Mr. Hero, this is what's called evidence of denial. In some cases, it can be proven that something never happened. For example, a particular wine glass has never been broken because it holds wine, and you can visually observe that it is in pristine condition with no cracks. It's simple, but what about the person? She seemed to think for a moment before continuing. Let's see. I can prove that I didn't leave town yesterday and rob some bank because I have a solid alibi proving that I was here in town all day. However, what about one day last week, last year, or even 10 years ago? You see, Mr. Hero, in most cases, there is no reliable record over any significant period of time that can prove a negative result. Let's apply that to your case. I could have one of my investigators watch your wife for a week or even a month and be able to tell you with reasonable certainty that she was not having, or, as the case may be, actually having an affair during that time. But I cannot prove that she did not have it a day, or a week, or perhaps several years before our investigation began. For this reason, negative evidence will not work in your case. Then the cloud of this stupid accusation will indeed hang over her head forever, I muttered, already knowing in my heart that what Miss Hightower said was true. Perhaps, but if we keep her under observation during the right circumstances and nothing happens, then you can infer from the actions she takes or doesn't take that something is probably right. What we will be able to tell you beyond a reasonable doubt is that she either did or did not cheat on you during the observation period, and this may also allow us to find evidence of past discretionary actions, if any. However, the problem is that we can never tell you with any degree of certainty that she never did it. So, if this scenario works for you, Mr. Hero, we would be happy to take your case. If not, we wish you all the best and good luck in finding an honest person who will do as you ask. Understanding her point of view, I hired her company and then spent a couple more hours with one of Miss Hightower's investigators answering additional questions. By filling out the questionnaire and planning for those right circumstances she mentioned. I had been working in an office in Atlanta all week, so on Saturday night after Reagan went to bed, I turned on the circuit breaker on the panel in the basement. I didn't notice anything Sunday morning, but by the time we got home from church and had lunch with a couple of new members, it was noticeably hot in the house upstairs. Reagan immediately complained, and I said I would go downstairs and check the breaker. I switched a few circuits that didn't make a difference, turned it off, and then back on again, and then went back upstairs. I couldn't find anything wrong, so I'm going to call the air conditioning service. Please, it will be too hot to sleep there today if you don't. I dialed our regular air conditioning company and logged into their automated system, pressing several buttons to move from menu to menu until I was on the line for almost 2 minutes and then hung up. Then I called the number Donna Hightower gave me. Hello, this is Trent Jeriou. We have a problem with the air conditioning system upstairs. How soon can you send someone here to check it out? Tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Okay, I think that's enough. Thanks, see you then. Reagan came in to listen to the end. It's too hot upstairs, so tonight we'll sleep in the guest room downstairs. It might seem like we're in a hotel somewhere, she added with a grin. With Reagan's suggestion in mind, we made up the bed that night, and I felt better than I had since Ethan made that stupid accusation against her. There was no way Reagan could have loved me so much and done what that asshole said that she was playing the fool. We got up Monday morning and Reagan told me to take off the sheets and throw them in the wash on the way to the shower. I was working from home on Monday morning and met with the air conditioning specialist. a subcontractor regularly used by Hightower Private Investigation Services, at 10 as planned. I showed him our house, and he went to work while I went downstairs and turned the circuit breaker back on. An hour later, he finished. They are activated when moving and remain on for 5 minutes after the end of movement. They have a wide-angle fiber optic lens, so they can record what you need with a very low chance of being noticed unless someone has a specific reason to be looking for them. These babies will get it all, and the quality will be good enough for legal purposes, but not good enough if you want to make any movies yourself or for public use online. 3 in your bedroom, 1 in each of the other rooms, and 1 on each bathroom door. If anything happens in connection with any of them, we will sort it out. After paying him the installation fee and 2 weeks' rent, I thanked him and went to work. When I returned home, the house was cool, but inside I was not. Baby, there were some problems with our work at the hotel in Orlando, so I had to add it to the trip this week. I was already planning to be in Tampa on Tuesday night, but decided to also visit the hotel in Orlando. Loretta quickly warned of changes with the airlines, so my flight from Orlando would not be until late Friday evening. I will try exchange on an earlier flight if anything was available, but Loretta said the chances looked pretty lousy. I'm sorry. I'm going to miss you so much, Reagan said, but let's see how we can catch up a little. The meetings in Tampa went well, and the questions that followed in Orlando were simple. In fact, I usually solved them remotely, but being on site helped keep our leadership team on their toes. Once everything was decided, I spent some time on site assessing the quality of the construction. I made comments and pointed out problems and potential pitfalls to the assistant project manager, who showed me around. He was young but smart, and I made a mental note that he would be ready for more responsibility very soon. I could have left on Thursday afternoon if I had been able to buy a plane ticket, but I didn't bother trying. Reagan wasn't expecting me until Friday evening, so I was going to give her every possible minute of that time to prove to Miss Hightower that she had a lot of options, but that she wasn't cheating on me. So I worked in my hotel room all afternoon and early Thursday evening went to one of Orlando's famous gun ranges, where in addition to regular pistols and rifles, they offer machine gun rentals for 3-odd-second shooting. I decided to rent a couple of pistols and let the tourist dads take a break from their kids and the Disney scene, or Universal, spend your hard-earned money on belching pistols. On Friday, I worked in a trailer at our construction site until it was time to head to the airport. Traffic on I-285 Friday night was probably as bad as driving through downtown, and traffic on 75 wasn't much better. I breathed a sigh of relief when I finally made it to our exit and was thrilled when I walked into the house and my loving wife ran into my arms. She saw that I looked stressed, so she brought me a beer, and we got cozy on the couch and talked for a while before she took me upstairs. Reagan went to the gym to work out on Saturday while I worked in the yard. Since I had a little time, I went inside to drink some water and see how things were going. Braves in their game, I opened my laptop and checked my personal email account. To my relief, there was nothing there from the special address Donna Hightower's investigator had given me. I checked again on Sunday afternoon while she was running some errands and grocery shopping. This time I blinked hard a few times before hesitantly clicking on the message to open it. When I did, I muttered, "Please, God, let this just be an update. Dear Mr. Jero, your order will be ready on Monday at 11 a.m. Please contact our office to arrange delivery. Larson's Tool Works." My hand shook as I closed the message, deleted it, and then deleted it from the trash forever. Reagan noticed that I didn't look well when she got home, and I avoided kissing her. "Yes, I don't feel very well," I answered. "I don't want you to get sick too. Let me hug you, and then you can go lie down while I prepare dinner. I hope after a while you feel better and can eat." She hugged me, but incredibly excited, I just stroked her back and pressed my head against hers. As I did this, I caught the scent of flowers. I didn't eat on Sunday night and got up very early on Monday morning. I thought about this when I was trying to sleep. The scent of flowers in her hair was not her usual shampoo, conditioner, or perfume. I didn't want to believe that something was happening, but the unusual smell and ominous message made me doubt whether something was really going on. She wasn't gone that long, was she? No, she could not have time for shopping or for any extraneous matters at all. Right? Yes, it must have been one of those cosmetic bags that squirt perfume samples at the store. After confirming my appointment first thing Monday morning, I arrived at Miss Hightower's office shortly before 11 a.m. I was escorted to the same conference room as the first time, and, as before, Miss Hightower greeted me. This time she waved her hand towards the chair and said, "Mr. Hero, we have completed our investigation ahead of schedule, and I'm afraid I have bad news." She pushed the folder towards me and then silently moved away when I opened it. My world, always so orderly, collapsed around me when I skipped reading the report and went straight to the photographs. Wait, the guy in this photo doesn't look like the guy I saw in the first one. I'm sorry, it's all in the report, but we documented her meeting 4 times with 3 different guys over the course of Saturday, and then repeating the second meeting yesterday afternoon, this time at a private home. What? I exclaimed, stunned by the news and all these numbers. But yesterday she went shopping. Her gaze was serious as she nodded. Mr. Gero, Mrs. Gero did some exercise on Saturday afternoon after her second encounter with Lover No, too, but only went to the grocery store on Sunday. You could check receipts or perhaps a credit card if she didn't use cash. But she was going to the gym on Saturday, I bleated, still trying not to believe the clearly laid out evidence in front of me. Miss Hightower shook her head. Sorry, Mr. Gero. Based on the photo of her leaving the hotel with lover number 2, we believe she was doing some other kind of gymnastics. Okay, but trust me, she didn't go anywhere near a real gym. How could this be? I demanded an answer, and my anger finally overpowered my mistrust. Hightower raised her hand to calm me down. I'm not a psychiatrist, Mr. Hero, just a damn good investigator and a pretty good judge of human character. Your wife seems a likely candidate for hypersexual disorder. She seems to be addicted to physical contact. It looks like she's going way beyond normal to do just that and hide what she did so you don't find out. Flowers, I breathed. The scent of flowers in her hair. She took a shower and washed her hair after meeting her boyfriend yesterday. Perhaps so, but judging by how long they were there, most likely they were quickly washed or sprayed with something. You see, from what we can tell from following her and watching the footage, she is an expert at what she does. But in our bed, I started, only to remember that she even changed the sheets on the guest bed after our night together just a week ago. Yes, 2 out of 3 nights when you were away, she cheated in your bed. She picked up her lover. Please don't call them that. Cheating, adulterous assholes, that's what they are. She chuckled slightly and nodded in response to my comment. At least one, yes. We don't actually have the first one's name, but the third one is single. However, assuming that he knew about her marital status, this makes him an accomplice to her adultery and an adulterer under state law. The other one, however, is the second one, who seems to be her constant lover. We were able to establish his identity and find out that he is married. Asshole, I breathed, opening the file and rummaging through it until I found a page with his photo at the top. My fists clenched, and it was all I could do not to slam my fist on the table. Crap, I think she's working with this asshole. I was just about to get to this. No will ever, 32 years old, married, and, as far as we can tell, was your wife's manager at her company a few months ago. Being a large, important firm with several offices, they do not advertise their corporate management structure, so it is possible that he works in another, perhaps parallel, department. I shook my head. No, you understood everything correctly. Mrs. Alemby was promoted at the end of spring, I think, and Mr. Wolliver became her new manager. Reagan never called him by name, and she said he wasn't very social, so I hadn't met him yet. But she pointed him out to me one day when I picked her up while her car was being repaired. It was Miss Hightower's turn to shake her head, although it looked like disbelief. No doubt, he's not very sociable with the wives of his mistresses, she grinned. A convenient excuse to keep you two apart. Anyway, Mr. Wolliver has no criminal record or outstanding warrants, but he has several outstanding parking tickets. Your wife met him at a bar on Wednesday night and drove him to your house for a little over an hour before driving him back and dropping him off in his car, which is how we found out his name from DMV records. We found information about his firm through web searches and the Internet Professional Network. That bastard, I breathed, clenching and unclenching my fists so as not to accidentally break something like my fingers. Hightower continued. Take it easy, Mr. Gerio. We're not done yet. Next, she met him at the hotel on Saturday afternoon, and then again yesterday, but this time, as I said earlier, at the house. According to tax records, this is his home, Mr. Hero. If Mrs. Wolliver had arrived a few minutes earlier, or your wife had left a few minutes later, Mrs. Gerio's game would probably have been lost. Damn, I hissed. Her game is already lost, but she just doesn't know it. You know, Miss Hightower, when I was young, I would chase any woman who seemed interested. It took a long time, but I finally realized that this would get me nowhere. While I love a good, I eventually found myself wanting more than that, and I met Reagan at the perfect time. She admitted that before me she had a free lifestyle, but she said that she loved me, that he wants to settle down. What? I could not continue, and Miss Hightower patted my arm. I smiled faintly at her in gratitude and looked back at the article about Oliver. My face hardened when I thought about what I wanted to do with the deceiver, the liar, the adulteress. Hightower squeezed my hand again, this time harder, forcing me to look into her eyes. Mr. Hero, I'm sorry for you that everything turned out this way, but I have to warn you, as I do with all my clients. Don't let the pain you feel overwhelm you. Feelings make you do things that are not who you really are. When a person finds out that his significant other is cheating on him, he often wants to take revenge, to cause cheater pain. But if you do and you go too far, well, if you do, it could potentially ruin your life. Do you understand this? She squeezed my hand and made me nod before continuing. Don't let her mistake ruin you and the future you could have had. If you hit back too hard, you could go too far and potentially end up in jail for a while or possibly even years. You could lose your job and almost everything you've worked for your entire adult life. You don't have kids, so you don't have anything to worry about. But that doesn't mean you can't still create a huge problem for yourself. Whatever you decide, just be careful and remember that it's her fault, not yours. So many things were going through my head. Treason, confirmed. Children, so close, but not now. Revenge, maybe not, but payback, yes, definitely. I wouldn't be the idiot who let his anger destroy me. I would be careful, I would control my emotions, but I would be just as damn cunning and cruel in my carefully calibrated reactions as she was, fooling me no matter how long she did it. I knew I would never physically hurt her. I wasn't that kind of person, but hurting her. Yes, I will. I'll be careful. But believe me, Miss Hightower, if that's what my soon-to-be ex-wife wants, she'll get it any way she can. So it will be. I'll try not to go too far, but trust me, it will be damn close, and she will feel every bit of the pain she caused me. Each one, damn, a piece. Miss Hightower sighed, knowing she couldn't stop me, but made one last attempt to calm me down. Okay, please be careful. Mr. Gerio, remember what you said and don't go too far. Crossing the line is much easier than you might expect. I don't want what you do to come back to bite you or haunt you. Hightower recommended George C. Godwin as a divorce lawyer. He agreed to meet me after hours, So I spent the next 2 hours on a bench in Piedmont Park, planning my divorce and my revenge. Then I downloaded all my records and went to him. Mr. Godwin was an older black man, Miss Hightower's younger uncle, as it turned out, and was as short, burly, and vivacious as she was tall, regal, and reserved. But he knew family law inside and out. He also knew the Georgia legal system like the back of his hand, having practiced law for nearly 50 years. George was very informal, insisted we call each other by our first names, and chatted a bit before moving on to why I chose divorce over reconciliation. When I showed him the photo file, he let out a long, low whistle. I guess that answers the question. Okay, what do we need? I handed him the flash drive with all the recordings Miss Hightower had suggested, and he plugged it into his laptop, said, a few times, and then repeated it a couple more times before blowing a kiss, like a true Italian, in the direction of his niece. This girl really knows her stuff. Trent, it looks finished, so I'll put everything together and let you know when we're ready to serve. Can you have this ready by next Monday? Oh, I can do it by then, but you'll have to pay overtime. Do it, please. I then discussed my plan with him, including the additional request. When I finished, his face showed nothing. You have to be careful, Trent, really careful. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but you're starting a trial where you can't go too far because the judge will decide the case based on the law. If you don't think looks and attitude matter, then I have a really great bridge for sale over the big river that runs through downtown Atlanta. I forced myself to smile, knowing that there were no rivers, big or otherwise, in downtown Atlanta. I returned home late on Monday evening. Citing fatigue and needing rest after my minor illness, I avoided kissing Reagan and stayed away from her completely. On Thursday evening, I made the call I had been dreading. Ethan, hi, this is Trent. Look, buddy, I have to apologize, big time. You were right, and I was as wrong as I could be. She was playing a prank on me. Ethan, being the closest thing I have to a brother, immediately forgave me and asked what he could do to help. I delayed getting home until late Friday night and then complained of being tired to avoid intimacy. Reagan was unhappy. I drove to my parents' house on Saturday morning to help my dad with a home project that had supposedly been pushed back to Sunday morning. I really wanted to let him know what was going on, but I knew I had to wait until things calmed down. Then the time will be right, and it will be too late to let anything slip out that shouldn't have. So I called Reagan late Saturday night to let her know that I wouldn't be home until the next afternoon, but when I called, I got the distinct impression when she answered that she wasn't home and that she probably wasn't alone. I held my tongue, saying a casual but completely false "love you" before ending the conversation. On Sunday afternoon, while Reagan was out, no doubt dating one of the scumbags, Mr. Godwin sent me a message. I quickly called him, and he confirmed that everything would be ready. The process server he hired agreed to deliver the documents promptly at 11 a.m. on Monday per my specific request, and to text me as soon as he met with her. I immediately called to set up a private day and then headed out, leaving a note for Reagan that I had something coming up for work and that she would call me at the office if she needed me. I drove to the office and spent the rest of the evening finalizing my plans. Reagan called twice that evening, and both times I told her it would take longer, that I'll be back even later than I told her before. I promised that I would leave early on Monday afternoon and that we would spend the entire evening together. This must have been what she wanted to hear because her sad mood changed to light and cheerful, and she told me she loved me before we finally ended the conversation. Of course, I was lying to her, but given the web of lies and deceit she had woven around me, I shook my head and said, "It's a break, baby. Turning is tough shit." After Reagan left for work, I walked around the house with a wide piece of brightly colored masking tape and taped a piece to everything that was specifically mine or had belonged to me before our marriage. I assumed that whatever was public property she would receive as part of our agreement or donate to a thrift store. Ethan showed up at 7:45, and the moving company crew arrived just a few minutes later. I helped them get started, and then Ethan took over while I finished packing what I needed for the short term. Everything that was in the truck will be put into storage. Reagan didn't notice, but I cleaned out my gun safe and took everything in it to my parents' house to put it in my dad's safe on Saturday. I was almost finished and was about to leave, planning to leave the rest to Ethan, when Amy, Reagan's neighbor and friend, saw the truck and came out to ask if we were moving. Luckily, I got to her before she could look into the truck or see that I had put a bunch of stuff in the back seat of my SUV in the garage. SHH, I said with a grin. I'll surprise Reagan with new furniture for our upcoming anniversary. It's 5 years old next week. I'm getting some old furniture and some junk out of the house before they deliver it tonight. It's a surprise and a little early due to their delivery schedule, so please don't mention it to her or anyone else until she tells you something about it. She agreed, smiling back at me, and went on her way. The news would probably spread around the area by noon, so I was glad that H hour was at 11. I tipped each of the movers generously and then shook Ethan's hand and thanked him before heading to the bank. I was there when they opened at 9 a.m. and took half the money out of our accounts in the form of a cashier's check. A few minutes later, I was at the credit union and deposited the cashier's check into a new account I opened online. At 10:45 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot of an office building in Sandy Springs and opened my laptop. I had already applied for a new credit card in my name, so since the current card had a zero balance, I closed it. It took longer than planned, and as a result, I started to lose time. However, it was done by 10:57 a.m., so I logged into our family email, which listed us both, and waited for the text message that showed up on my phone right at 11 a.m. As planned, processing server just asked about her. They replied that she was on her way. A minute later, another message arrived. Processing server, she's in the lobby now. Almost shaking with nerves, I downloaded the message I had already prepared for our email. I was thinking about accessing Reagan's work email and sending the version I wrote and actually wanted to send from there since I knew her password, but Donna Hightower's warning that I had gone too far and her uncle's confirmation that I do what I want could put me in a very difficult position in front of a judge and possibly even in prison. Playing poker at night put an end to this idea. For now. The message was sent to several of our friends and family. A rumor spread that something had happened between us and that I had filed for divorce as a result. The 3 photos were included in the post rather than as attachments to prevent them from being removed from the post. Reagan and Noah's faces were visible in each of the photographs. However, again heeding warnings not to go too far, the photos were carefully cropped and blurred to hide any juicy details. But it was quite obvious what was going on and, with the timestamp. The second message, the one I really wanted to send, remained unused on the flash drive. Finally, the message was not sent to Reagan or Noah. There was no need to warn them of the impending storm. The message was ready and looked correct, so I clicked send. Once I was sure everything went right, I quickly logged out, closed my laptop, and put it under my seat. My phone rang at 11:03. It was Reagan, so I answered the phone. Trent, what's going on? Divorce? Why? I thought we were happy together. Have you found someone else? I laughed at her hysteria. Did you think we were happy? No, I thought we were happy until I found out what you were doing. Yes, I know. Look at the back of the envelope that my lawyer included in the package. I heard her swearing and fretting over the phone, promising me eternal love, just like she did in front of God, the pastor, and many of our friends and family at church 5 years ago. Crap, she screamed over the phone. Crap, Trent, no, it's not what it looks like. Seriously? No, Trent, let me explain. No, Reagan, I don't think you have enough time to adequately explain this. We're done. My attorney's contact information is in this packet. If you need anything, contact him. I hung up, and she was still talking, or rather, practically screaming into the phone. When she realized that I was no longer there, she called back again, so I sent the message to voicemail. She left what seemed like a long one, and a few moments later a text message arrived from her. The voicemail was much the same denials and lies, so it was deleted, as was the text message, as well as 3 text messages, and the next voice message that followed quickly. Not wanting to hear her cry any more crocodile tears, hear another lie, excuse or apology, and definitely not wanting to hear any more promises, since she had already broken the sacred thing that really mattered, I did not listen to the new message and read the texts before removing them. Then I blocked Regan's number. Immediately after that, I dialed my father-in-law's number. Since Bob and Chessie were my friends and also my in-laws, I didn't message them either. "Hey Bob, it's Trent. I hate to call you at work like this, but it's important, and I think you need to hear it firsthand, not secondhand. And I'm doing it now, not later, because the shit just hit the fan." I think I heard him swallow over the phone. "What's going on, son?" he asked. "Bob, I'm truly sorry to tell you this, but due to Regan's failure to honor her marital vows, I am forced to dissolve our marriage." "Trent, no. I know my daughter's story, but she has changed. You can't take this seriously, holding something over her for a long time." "Bob, I would never do this, but she had a relapse, a serious one, and it wasn't that long ago. 2 weeks ago, when I was out of town, she seemed to go crazy. I have the places, dates, and times to prove it, as well as photographs and even video footage of some of them. This has been killing me since I found out, and I hate to tell you this, especially over the phone, but you need to know that I'm not doing this because I want to, but because I can't trust her anymore anyway. I can't go on any longer, so I'm stopping this now. The paperwork was submitted this morning, and she was served with it." "No, I cannot believe this." She promised that she had passed this stage. There was despair in his voice, full of denial. "She made a promise to all of us, Bob, but her promises obviously didn't mean enough to her to keep them. If only she had remained faithful to them and to me, I would have loved her forever. You know it. But now it's too late for that, and the love I felt for her has disappeared, dried up and considered away. However, I still love you and your wife and don't want to hurt either of you, so I'm telling you this directly rather than via email. My former father-in-law expressed deep sorrow for what his daughter did to us as a couple and to his family and me as friends. With regret in our voices, we said goodbye. I quickly called Chessie too, but it went to voicemail. I suspected Bob had her on speed dial, so I left a quick message. It was 11:16 a.m., and I began executing the only part of my plan that left me in doubt. If I had gone through this part, I would have hurt someone I didn't know, to someone who probably didn't deserve it, but if I don't, it could lead to more pain in the long run. So I put on sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a lanyard with my laminated photo ID for a delivery company that, as far as I know, doesn't exist, but has Ethan's phone number at the bottom. He knew that any calls he didn't know about had to be answered between 11 and 11:30 a.m., with Sunshine Process serving. I popped a piece of chewing gum into my mouth and entered the building. At the security desk, I said, "Hello, TC Giro from Sunshine Couriers and Process Serving. Got a special package for Mrs. Melissa Wellever." The guard frowned. "They should be sent to the reception area on the ground floor." "No, the courts say differently," I said, doing my best impression of Chevy Chase in the old Fletch movie. "Special service requires a photo ID and personal signature. This is usually best handled quietly, but we can make a scene if you prefer, and I'll end up having to run all over town to find her, which will end up getting her into even more trouble." "No, wait," said the guard. "What do you need?" I go up to her company, meet her in the lobby, verify her identity, and get her signature. "I'm leaving here in 5 minutes. No fuss." He nodded slowly. "You must have a visitor badge to go upstairs. I need to hold your ID while you have your badge." "Got it," I agreed, handing him my driver's license. With considerable reluctance, he took it and handed the badge to me. "Come back immediately. You will get this back," he said, holding up my license, "when you put this badge back in my hand. Is it clear?" I tipped my cap in greeting and blew a small bubble before turning and heading towards the elevator. On the third floor, I went to the reception desk of Melissa's company Willever a few moments later. The same phrase was used there. The young lady behind the counter looked even more hesitant than the security guard in the main lobby, but she pressed the button and called Mrs. Willever to the reception. When I noticed the trash can in the lobby, I threw out my chewing gum and my baseball cap fell off and went into my bag. "Pretended with your courier bag." Fletch's image disappeared. Melissa Willever was very pretty. She was in her late 20s or early 30s, with tan skin, dark brown hair, and dreamy brown eyes, which made me think there might be some Hispanic blood in her family tree. When she entered the lobby of the company, she had an awkward expression on her face. When the secretary pointed at me, Mrs. Willever looked at me and hesitated for a moment before heading in my direction. "Joan said you have something for me to sign," she said hesitantly. "No, sorry, Mrs. Willever, I'm Trent Jeriou. You don't actually have to sign, but I have to pass this on to you as it concerns you." "What? What is this?" "Mrs. Willever, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband had an affair with my wife." My words were spoken in a whisper, and I handed her a short, cropped photograph of the two of them in bed. The envelope contains documents confirming everything, including candid photographs and videos. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head. "It must be a fake. Noah promised me." "It's not fake, Mrs. Willever. I paid good money to a detective agency to find out what was going on with my wife, asking them to prove that she was not having an affair after I heard rumors about it. They proved exactly the opposite, that this was the case. The envelope contains written confirmation that everything you see here is real, unedited, and obtained legally with my permission. The private investigation firm and my lawyer have assured me that this will be acceptable and will be upheld in court if you decide to go this route. As of this morning." "But he promised," she whispered, bursting into tears. She leaned towards me, and I put my right arm around her and patted her on the back. "He said that the first time was a mistake, that it was just in the heat of the moment, and that it wouldn't happen again. We took steps to make sure that didn't happen, and now he backs down and does it again. Why? I don't know, Mrs. Willever, but this time it wasn't in the heat of passion. This was carefully planned, and more than once. In the envelope you will see documentation of 3 meetings between them over 5 days. Her hand clutched my shirt as she shook her head briefly and quickly against my chest, realizing the extent of her husband's betrayal. With a height of about 170 centimeters and a weight of 60 kilograms, I was a good 20 centimeters taller than her. She wiped away her tears before looking at me again. The flow had stopped, but her cheeks were still wet from the recent flood. She let go of me and took a step back. "I think you're right. I gave him another chance, but this is the end, and this time we will end up in court. I do not know how. I have included the name and contact information for a private investigation service in case you need them for further investigation or if you need someone to testify. I also included the name of the lawyer they recommended. He seems like a nice guy and has been very responsive to my case so far. He completed the paperwork and they were served this morning." Dejected, she took the envelope and thanked me before starting to turn away. However, she stopped and said, "Mr. Hero, I hate to ask this, but can I call you if I get stuck and need some advice? My number is in the envelope." After visiting a testing lab that Donna Hightower recommended, I sweated for the next few days while leading a project in South Georgia. It was nice to be able to escape at the end of every long day, but the thought that I might have contracted something terrible or even potentially fatal made me even more angry at Reagan and the risks she took for a few and maybe many cheap thrills. However, Luck smiled on me later that week when the testing laboratory informed me that I did not have any medical conditions. I breathed a sigh of relief that at least this danger did not bite me. However, Reagan was still trying to reach me, leaving message after message on my voicemail at work and on my cell phone from other numbers. When I checked the messages, I deleted her as soon as I heard her voice, but she refused to take the hint. When I returned to my office on Friday morning, there were others waiting for me, so I deleted them one by one and pulled out the phone's user manual to find out how to block the number. After a few minutes, this problem was resolved, and I decided to visit my parents again this weekend. They also received messages from Reagan, so I took the liberty of blocking her number there too. Mom was especially upset, especially since she knew that Reagan and I were ready to have children. She even asked me to reconsider the divorce, saying that what Reagan did couldn't be that bad. I shook my head in response and showed her one carefully cropped photo with the date visible. Tears streamed down her face, and she nodded, finally understanding the truth despite wanting to deny it. She hugged Dad tightly as I waved goodbye to her and headed to my temporary home. The next workday, Andy Smith ran into my office with bad news just before noon. Trent, Mary Jo Bogolski's water just broke, a few weeks before she was scheduled to go on maternity leave. What are we going to do? The answer probably should have been saying a prayer for MJ and the kids, sending them a gift, and sending him home to pack since he had to fill in for her during maternity leave. Andy didn't seem too happy about this when it was first brought up, as it forced him to finish his current project a couple of weeks early, but Mr. Strickland felt that he was the best candidate for the job. Now Andy looked panicked as his project still had almost a month to go before it was due to finish early. After reviewing our project schedules, Andy and I went to Mr. Strickland with an alternative proposal. To avoid upsetting Andy's project, I would take over the New Orleans job instead, as long as I would still be available to handle major issues on our other projects when needed, and I could also help out at Baton Rouge. Early that evening, word came that Mary Jo and her newborn twins were okay. I was getting closer to leading the project, and with every kilometer I was getting further away from Reagan and my past. It was late by the time I got to my hotel, and I went to sleep for a few hours before getting up early and heading to my work site. I spent the morning diving deeper into the project, meeting with a couple of subcontractors and going over plans for the coming weeks. Everything was as good as I expected, so I left early in the afternoon to stop at the store and go to the hospital to see Mary Jo. She had already received the flowers I sent, so I gave her a thank you note for doing a good job on the project and a gift certificate for her babies, who were in the NICU for a while until they were a little older and could go home. Although I couldn't visit them, I was able to see them on the monitor as MJ and Ozzy watched them lovingly. I was so happy for them, but the thought that I would probably never have a child of my own hurt when I left, so I turned my thoughts back to the project. Over the next couple of days, this became everything to me, and on Friday, I invited the management of our construction office for drinks in the French Quarter after we closed for the weekend. George Godwin called on Monday with the latest news about my divorce. He had a hard time in Atlanta when his office received numerous calls from Reagan trying to reach me, and he seemed to become more hysterical with each subsequent call. "Are you sure you don't want to talk to her?" he asked. I chuckled sarcastically at his question and heard him practically burst into laughter on the other end of the line. I thanked him and went back to work. That evening, when I got to my extended stay hotel room, there was a text message on my phone. I didn't recognize the number, but the message said, "Hi, Trent. My lawyer filed my papers today, and Noah received them. Can we talk when you have a chance? Thank you, Melissa W." It was late, so I sent a text message to see if she was still awake. My phone rang a few seconds later. "Hello, Trent. Thanks for talking to me." "Glad to do it, Melissa. How are you doing?" "It's hard, but I can handle it," she answered with doubt in her voice. "What about you?" Since she declined my offer to open up, I replied, "Sounds about the same as you." "Melissa," I asked, "what's going on?" There was a short silence before she spoke again, saying, "Trent, I wanted to thank you for what you did in exposing what Noah was doing to me and then making me think before I did something rash. You could have taken advantage of how vulnerable I was in that moment, but you didn't, forcing me to stop and think so I could realize how wrong it would be. I really appreciate it and appreciate your help. It won't be easy, but I'm determined to get through it. Melissa, we were in the same place at the time, and it wouldn't have been right for both of us. I'm in a better place now, at least a little better, including being away from her, and I'm glad to hear, if not hope, at least determination in your voice. Definitely. There's still a long way to go, but it's definitely better than it was. Fine. I started to tell her that if she ever needed to talk, she could call me, but I hesitated, not sure. Her future ex was a first-class jerk, but he was primarily for her, not for me. I was just collateral damage to him when he took advantage of my ex's apparently open invitation, but I still had plans for him too, so I kept my mouth shut and we wished each other luck before saying goodbye. While the work in New Orleans was progressing well, I also continued to supervise the work in Baton Rouge, based on Mr. Strickland's orders, and was frequently called upon for advice on other projects. It didn't take long before I felt like I was, to use Louisiana parlance, in a swamp and up to my armpits in alligators. George helped make it happen a couple of weeks later when he called and said, "Trent, I have some news." Mrs. Jeriou's lawyer asked the judge to schedule a consultation. If he does, you'll have to face her here in Atlanta for at least a couple of sessions, maybe more. The judge will give you time, and you will have to appear here in the city. Otherwise, the trial will not benefit you. What do you want me to do? My blood boiled that they were using this tactic, but George told me from the very beginning that it was possible. When we submitted the application, we had a minimum of documents about her infidelity. You said we could leave the rest as it shouldn't be necessary. This may be needed now. What happens if the judge sees this? We'll have to turn this over to her lawyer, but Judge Johnson might agree to vacate the request, if he doesn't get a kick out of it when he sees it. First warn, and then do it. A week later, Regan's request for counseling was denied, although George said Judge Johnson hinted that she might want to seek self-counseling about her sex addiction problem. And it was another alligator from the swamp. Over the next few months, as Regan and her lawyer fought George and the Georgia court, I kept a low profile, hoping that Regan didn't hire someone to find me, or possibly remove me. To be on the safe side in the latter case, I asked George to rewrite my will, and I changed my life insurance policy to ensure that she wouldn't get a penny if anything happened to me. However, once Mary Jo and Ozzy's children were released from the hospital, I visited them for dinner a couple of times and even sat with them one evening. Todovs could get out of the house and have some peace and quiet. The twins were quiet for the first few minutes after their parents left, but then they realized something was going on and allowed me to do it with all four lungs. As much as I wanted children, I then prayed that if the good Lord ever allowed me to have children, he would allow me to have them one at a time. To my surprise, I also heard from Melissa several times, who was asking how my divorce was going and essentially asking me to have the strength and courage to deal with my own without even saying a word. Because of Georgia laws and divorce codes, George's warnings, and my own personal morals, I was careful and never crossed any boundaries that could be construed as or twisted into something romantic or potentially adulterous. As Melissa's case became more complicated, she apparently no longer needed me, so her messages stopped coming. When Mary Jo's maternity leave came to an end, I hired a realtor who was looking for a house to buy. Using funds from my pre-Reagan account for the down payment, I closed on the Dunwoody house a few weeks before MJ returned. After spending almost 3 months in a long-stay facility at company expense, I was determined to feel more comfortable once I returned home and could pick up my belongings from storage. The twins were doing well when Mary Jo's maternity leave ended, so she returned to work for the last few months of the project. After handing over the reins to her, I found myself leaving, only to return home with three regrets. The first was that since we did not currently have another project planned in New Orleans, MJ would be leaving our firm to become a stay-at-home mom for a while. Ozzy, who had family in the area, received a tenure-track position as an adjunct professor at Loyola during their stay, so this was not a surprise. However, MJ asked me to keep her in mind if we had another job in the New Orleans area in the near future, which I readily agreed to. Secondly, with my return to Atlanta, I would be leaving behind my unofficial godchildren and what had become more frequent babysitting gigs for MJ and Ozzy. The kids were obviously used to me visiting them sometimes and taking care of them on the weekends so their parents could go somewhere, and I knew I would miss watching them grow up. Caring for them was a reminder of my own childless condition due to the hell Reagan condemned me to. Finally, Reagan was arguing with me over the details of the divorce, and it was dragging on, although George Godwin assured me that Judge Johnson was as tired of it as I was, and that the end of the matter was near. So when I returned to Atlanta, I immediately moved into my new house and started unpacking and getting some work done during my week off. I also met a few of my new neighbors, including a nice divorced woman who lives just a few doors down. Moving home gave me more freedom, but I was still legally bound to the woman who was cheating on me, which meant I couldn't start dating again without fear of upsetting the court case. I thanked divorced Noel for the plate of brownies, but politely declined when she suggested we go out to dinner sometime. Since she had experienced the divorce system before, I think she understood. Ethan, who was always looking for Miss Right and who knew nothing about the court system in Georgia, didn't understand. So, when are you going back there? He asked over lunch one day shortly after I returned to Atlanta. When the judge declares my divorce final, and I can rest assured that romantic endeavors and any dalliances that may lead to them will potentially not contribute a single penny to the Reagan settlement. So long, huh? So how is this evil woman doing these days? He asked. I don't know, and I don't care. You know you still owe her. Thank you very much to her. I looked at my best friend and nodded. I know, and she will get it when the time comes. Every last bit. Judge Johnson finally had enough of Reagan's delays and antics. He requested that we both be present in the courtroom for closing statements and presentations in early April. Moreover, Reagan and her lawyer were on one side of the court, and George and I were on the other. I arrived a few minutes early and was waiting for George when I saw Reagan turn the corner, spot me, and head towards me. Trent, it didn't have to be this way. I know, Reagan, but you failed to fulfill your part of our vows, so it is what it is. You were gone so often. Bullshit. You knew how often I would be absent when you agreed to marry me. The 3 times we were together that I exceeded that amount, each time by a day. I used the extra time to more than make it up to you. Of course, I'm not including that last trip to Tampa and Orlando in those 3, since you sorted everything out with your boss and your other lovers while I was away and after I returned. She looked angrier than I had ever seen her, and tears were streaming down her face. Trent, but I had needs. You know how much I needed this. Reagan noticed that several people were watching us, so she said, "Can we go somewhere and talk about this?" No, I don't see the need. See, we talked about all this before we agreed to get married, and you promised that your wanderings were over because you wanted to get married, settle down, and have a family. You got married, all right? But you failed in that and in everything else. Why don't you just accept it and let it go? I have come to terms with it. Of course, if you don't succeed, you can always turn to another therapist. Maybe this one will be luckier than the other. She flinched at my words and practically reeled when I pointed out her failures. The number of people looking our way increased, so I left her standing there crying, wallowing in her disappointment when I saw George heading my way. "Trent, please," she called, but George and I headed into the courtroom, ignoring the others. The judge demanded that we both be present when the documents were signed, probably so that Reagan would not delay this even longer. He commented on the fact that it was the first time he'd seen us together, which led to Reagan's outburst of anger followed by a pitiful cry. Judge Johnson silenced her and then forced her to listen to his statement. When it was over, the hammer came down, ending this and our 5-year marriage. I shook George's hand and thanked him after Judge Johnson left the courtroom. But as I turned to leave, Reagan started pleading as she walked toward me. As I continued walking, ignoring her, she began screaming at me, spewing anger and obscenities. Most people know not to do this in a courtroom, and I'm sure Reagan knew too, but her anger got the better of her. I'm not sure if one of the bailiffs arrested her or not, because George and Igedwin took advantage of the moment to escape. We had the conversation she wanted, even though it probably didn't go the way she wanted, and that was enough for me. I didn't want to talk to her anymore. George tried to assure this. Because of her public display, George filed for a restraining order the next day, and Judge Johnson readily agreed. I couldn't have organized it better if I tried. With a restraining order, Reagan would have stayed away from me whether she wanted to or not. I almost hoped she wouldn't do it. A short stay at the iron bar might do her some good. However, she was too smart for that. She was out of my life and out of my sight. So the next weekend I started dating again, setting up a date with Noel another time. She was nice, but it soon became obvious that we had little in common other than a very long period of abstinence. Noel and I remained casual friends, but we never met again. I dated another woman the following weekend, and then another in Birmingham during my trip the following week. I felt empty, often for several reasons, after each date when I realized that despite enjoying the moment, I was no closer to my goal of finding the right woman. I wanted a girlfriend, lover, and life partner, someone I could eventually start a family with. Over the next 2 months, I began to doubt that this would ever happen, that I will someday be successful in finding long-term happiness. However, short-term happiness was quite common and quite pleasant until the Independence Day weekend, when I visited my parents and watched my sister, her husband, and their 4 children. Mom, knowing me better than I suspected, told me that day that I would probably never give her and Dad grandchildren unless I changed something. I know, Mom. I bought a house and I'm renovating it. Trent, home isn't everything. A man and a good woman, not one of those easy ones you dated, can do it if they can do it. Son, what you need is to find a good woman. I know this, Mom, and someday I will do it. I'll find one. Just give me time. She snorted. If we keep giving you more time, your father and I will be dead by then and will never see our grandchildren. She reprimanded, at least partially, but it still gave me pause. One evening in late July, I received a text message. Hey Trent, this is Melissa Wooliver. Could we talk sometime when you have a free minute? To be honest, I was surprised to hear her again after all this time. I finished cleaning my paint sprayer and then texted her a quick reply to call when she could. She did just that, just a few moments later. Hey Trent, thanks for agreeing to talk to me. No problem, Melissa. How are you doing? We haven't talked for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't dare send a message tonight. I wasn't sure that, given everything that had happened, that you would want to talk to me again. I laughed. Unless you took an active part in ensuring that my ex-wife and your husband received. Ex-husband, from today, she interjected. Together, then I don't hold you responsible for everything that happened between them, or for the disaster they caused, so I have no reason not to talk to you. Good, because I swear I had nothing to do with this. I never thought you'd do this, so what's up? Well, it took longer than expected, but like I said, I'm finally free. I even have my maiden name Ortiz again, and I wanted to thank you for your help. You opened my eyes to what that bastard was doing. You provided me with the evidence for free, so I didn't have to spend money I couldn't afford to get, and then gave me advice on what I needed to do. I went to another lawyer, but you helped me a lot, Trent, and I appreciate it. You're welcome, so don't think about it anymore, okay? It's hard, Trent, because you You were my guiding light, my inspiration, if you will, when I was so down. I don't know you very well at all, but I like what you've done and what I've seen so far, so I'm going to take a chance and end up doing something I've never done before. Won't you have dinner with me? It was a very nice dinner, but I spent the evening looking at her, thinking about how sweet and beautiful she was, and how her ex-husband must have been the biggest idiot in the world to leave her instead to think about what we eat. True, Reagan was no less beautiful and had her own special appeal, but after she learned about her secret dark side, which would betray the person she was supposed to love more than anyone in the world, her previous rating out of 11 dropped to negative numbers. At least in my eyes. You're staring, she said with a grin, almost as much as me. I chuckled and nodded. It's fun to really stare when you have someone so nice to focus on. She blushed, covering her mouth with her hand to hide how much she liked my compliment. Do you want to get out of here? And, maybe, come back to me. I think I would like it. I left cash for my meal and tip instead of waiting for our server to check my card. We walked hand in hand like new lovers, taking a break from our journey when we reached my SUV. We started a relationship. One day, while at her house, I noticed Melissa's chest of drawers. There were a few photos on it, so I quickly glanced at them before they made me stop. It was probably rude of me, but I looked at one and picked it up to take a closer look. Trent, what are you doing? Melissa asked. Melissa, who is this little girl in these photos? This is my daughter, Ansley. She is 3 years old and means the world to me. Her words surprised me, even frightened me, and I said, You never mentioned her to me. I didn't want her to get involved in the trouble with Noah, so I tried to protect her as best I could, but she turned out to be the main stumbling block in our divorce. That's why it took so long to complete the process. Trent, I don't want you to date until we think we're serious, that there could really be something between us. Where is she now? I tried to keep my voice steady, but I think it may have gone up an octave. She's with him this weekend. Why did you ask? Is there something wrong? I liked her so much, but it was a surprise, a shock even, and what that meant. Well, I wasn't sure. Melissa, I don't know. I like you. I really like you, I admitted, going against my usual tendency to be slow. Considering how long we've known each other, I like you a lot more than I probably should. But if there's anyone in the world I don't like as much as my ex-wife, well, this is your ex-husband. 6 from one, half a dozen from another, that's what my grandmother would call this coincidence. I told you that I really want children, so you can imagine that I would want to be involved in your daughter's life if we worked out. But let's think about this for a minute. If I go to her soccer game or piano recital, her cheerleading practice, her school dance or whatever, who else will be there? Noah, she breathed, beginning to understand what I was getting at. He's a lying, cheating asshole, but he really loves her. Exactly. And every time I see him at one of these events, no matter what it is, it will be a reminder of what he did to my ex and what he helped do to my marriage. I'd be pissed as hell at him, and I think that, Ansley, although I wouldn't understand, I would understand that there is something between us. There's some tension. She would end up hating me for it, Melissa, which would damage any relationship I might have with her. And as a result, in turn, damage our relationship, yours and mine. As much as it pains me to say it, I think over time it would destroy everything we have together. She sat, almost in a whisper. She said, understanding, you say that we have no future. As much as I'd like to try and prove myself wrong, no, I don't think I am, I agreed. She nodded and tears streamed down her eyes. I thought it was too simple, too perfect. Now I know that it was so. Please, Trent, just go away. She tapped her phone a couple of times and added, the garage door will be open for you. She fell back onto the bed and sobbed. I grabbed my clothes and got dressed in the hallway on the way out, hating myself every step of the way almost as much as I hated her ex-husband. It hurt, but deep down I knew it was true. Later that day, I went to visit my parents. I gave them a short, edited version, but they both knew there was more to me than I was saying, and that what I was feeling hurt me far more than I was willing to admit. Mom tried to get more out of me, but I shook my head and told her it would never work. Mom, being a mom, gave me a motherly hug, patted me on the back, and told me everything would be okay. As much as I wanted to believe it, I didn't see it at the time. We met my sister and her family for lunch after church on Sunday. I had to wait a long time for a table at the restaurant, so she took me aside and made me tell me everything. She was 2 years older than me and had helped me through a few failed crushes when I was in high school, so I opened up and told her most of it, but without any action in the bedroom, although I suspect she figured it out. "I understand how hard it would be," she said later, "but I think you could do it if you tried and realized that you really loved her. One date doesn't say much, and if you had more, you might realize there's not as much there as you think, but it might also prove to you that there is, and that the fight for it is worth it. If you want." Thank you, sister, and you are right. This one date doesn't tell the whole story, but it told me enough to know that it would have hurt a lot more to get close to her and then see the future doomed to fail. Listen, little brother, you won't know for sure until you try. I nodded and agreed to think a little. Our lunch then went on so that we didn't talk about it again, but it didn't leave my mind for the rest of the trip home and in the days that followed. Ethan understood this better than anyone and agreed with my thoughts on the matter. But it was only on the way home from a trip to the plant near Lagrange that I began to think about it. Considering Ethan's luck with women, was agreeing with me really such a good thing? He set us up with a couple of women the following weekend. We all had fun, and it didn't take long before I put it out of my mind. During the divorce, Reagan wanted to keep our house as part of the settlement, so I made George resist by insisting on selling since she couldn't afford the buyout without giving up many other things she wanted. It was quite petty and cruel, but I figured it was karma given the circumstances, and I didn't lose a moment's sleep over it. Since I didn't want to get ripped off, I also brought in George as my representative for the sale. He and lawyer Reagan had known each other for years, so they were on good terms, unlike Reagan and I, and George found out that Reagan was just about to buy an apartment. Sometime later, I heard a rumor that Reagan and Noah were getting married. Upon hearing this news, I immediately called George as it could potentially impact my finances. During our divorce proceedings, George argued to the judge that no support should be provided because Reagan was the adulterer and I was the aggrieved party, but the judge took into account our relative incomes and awarded her a small monthly amount for 5 years or as long as she will not marry again, whichever comes first. I think this was the only point that George lost in our agreement, but even this amount was less than he predicted, if she really gets married again. I'll check it out and let you know. If this is true, we will stop supporting him, George said. Yeah, and if that's true, it just goes to show that some people never learn anything, I said in disbelief, thinking about them being together and what that would mean, even if it further confirmed my decision to break up with Melissa. No, George laughed. This is what keeps me in business. And I thought, this gives me an opportunity that I thought about at the beginning of my divorce, but never believed was actually possible. After learning of their marriage, I made a point of contacting a friend at the Reagan firm. Will Kleiner and I knew each other in college and reconnected when I started dating Regan and discovered he was working at her firm in a different department. Reagan and I met Will and his wife a few times while we were dating and married, but Will and I haven't seen each other since the divorce began, so we met for lunch shortly after while I wasn't traveling. When I told him what happened, Will replied, "It's terrible. I'm sorry, Trent. I heard Thatwelliver asked to be transferred to another department. Now it makes sense. They avoid any conflicts with our HR department. So you guys have an official policy on this sort of thing?" Certainly. They could get into big trouble if they violate it, and could potentially land the firm in trouble as well. Will, I hate to ask this, But do you think you can get me a copy of this section of your HR manual? Yes, but don't tell anyone where you got it. I had a date the following Saturday, and we met Will and Lori Kleiner at the Braves game. Will handed me the flash drive that evening, and a few days later I went to George to talk to him about it all. Trent, I'm sorry. Even though that's what their policy says, even if you can prove they knew, he said, laughing at his own phrasing. That doesn't give you the right to sue because of the way the state law is written. Interested in making sure that sex between consensual partners was not a potential crime. The state legislature got rid of alienation of affection in Georgia back in '79, around the time I started working on my own. This prevents one partner from suing someone else for attracting or distracting the other. This includes the firms that hire them. Crap. Although I didn't care about the money, I hoped that the firm's financial punishment would force them to punish Noah, and, if I was lucky, Reagan too. He smiled. Many potential plaintiffs have said this word or something worse after learning about this fact. This means that no one can sue them for this, except perhaps in very limited circumstances where the firm was positively informed, with proper documentation, of what was going on and nothing was done about it. In this case, someone who has been taken advantage of by a serial rapist may be allowed to have his day in court, but the plaintiff's chances of winning a significant amount are severely limited, so much so that most self-respecting lawyers would not take on such a case with a 10-foot pole. I sighed, repeating, "Damn." He laughed. "Hey, don't lose hope. Let's deal with the spousal support issue first and talk about other options a little later." The next week, George was at the courthouse filing a new motion. With evidence that Reagan and Asshole's marriage license had been filed, George asked that spousal support be terminated as it was no longer necessary or appropriate under our divorce decree. Attorney Regan, of course, strongly opposed this motion, and we suspected that the reason the marriage license was filed far from Atlanta was to prevent us from locating it and avoid filing the very motion to deny support that George was serving now. Judge Johnson agreed with us, shrugging it off over Reagan's objections, and I was released from paying the monthly sum that had been in my pocket since he demanded it. However, when I brought up the second issue, George looked at me, shook his head, and wagged his finger at me. Patience, Trent. Patience. 6 months later, George Godwin called me, and we met for lunch a few days later. Trent, the reason I suggested you wait is because newlyweds need time to get to know each other better, and in a case like this, where Noah moved to another department in the same company, he will be very careful for a while. Time. He needs time to get his bearings and find a new purpose, just as a little shine begins to emanate from this new marriage. Based on what you've told me and what I've seen of guys like this in the past, I'm guessing now would be a good time to check something out. It took 2 weeks, but Dawn Hightower and one of her investigators proved that just as tigers don't change their stripes, leopards don't change their spots, or whatever the old saying is, serial cheaters don't stop cheating. No Willever was sorting things out with one of his new subordinates, so George took the information, packed it up in a nice package, and went to one of his lawyer friends. "We don't want this to get to you, Trent, because whoever replaces Judge Johnson sees your involvement. If Mr. Willever, say, loses his job. In this case, Mrs. Willever may be able to file for restoration of spousal support based on your actions affecting her current spouse. I'm not sure where she's going to find out about this because I'm damn sure I won't tell her, and if anything happens to the asshole gnome, I suspect that he will not tell her the real reason for this." George grinned, shaking his finger at me. Vile, vile, and it's so true. George's friend, a lawyer, delivered the package to Noah's company. I learned from my friend Will that he was taken out by security that same day, and there were rumors that he would not be accepted back. There were rumors that Reagan cried when she found out and asked why, but no one said. "Take it away, asshole," I said after the conversation ended. "If I continue like this, I risk turning into an embittered old man." Smiling only to myself, I knew I was willing to take this risk. not wanting my name to be associated with this in case Reagan found out and went to the judge to try to restore my spousal support. I stayed overnight anonymously that day and received a phone call the next evening. "Trent," Melissa Ortiz exclaimed. "I know you might never want to talk to me again, but I had to call to tell you. Noah called last night and told me that he had been laid off from the firm corporate cutbacks, he said, and that he was going to apply for a reduction in child support as a result. I called a friend from the company and heard that there were rumors in the company that he had been fired. Then today I received an urgent package, an anonymous urgent submission. Mind you, that probably explains this and should allow the judge to keep my spousal support the same when Noah files his request. Trent, I guess I know who to thank for this. So, to this person I say thank you." I chuckled. I'm guessing that if you talked to the right person about it, he would say that you would only be happy if he was able to admit that he did it. Regarding what was in the package, can we say that some people never learn? My guess is that Noah will sing the judge a sad song about his plight, and then when my lawyer gives the judge that information back, I hope the judge throws those exact words at him. He just got married for the second time. For God's sake, I wonder if he started wandering so quickly when we got married. Melissa, don't think like that. It's in the past, so keep it to yourself. Just smile and enjoy your life, okay? You deserve it. We said goodbye for what I suspected was the last time. Having said this, I smiled. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. I've been through it all, I've survived, and while some may disagree, I've brought back just as much hell and heartache as Reagan and Noah put me through, going as far as I dared, but not too far. Although she was probably cheating again, too. I helped leave Reagan in a much worse financial situation in a condominium instead of a nice home, and with an unemployed husband paying child support. Also, I knew that she was in a relationship where her husband was cheating on her on a regular basis, but I didn't bother to tell her about it, just like she didn't tell me what she did to me. I tried to give her the best and make her happy, but now I suspected that she had more worries than she could count. Yes, I hit back at each of them, but I didn't regret anything. Not one damn thing. In fact, as I replayed it in my mind, I realized that I no longer called them by the derogatory names that had always been present in my mind. Having accepted my retribution, I no longer had to think about them again or worry about what they might think. And that realization led to the biggest smile of all. The smile did not last long, however, because over the next few weeks I made one final discovery, this time the most difficult of all. As much as I thought I had evened the score with Reagan and Noah, I was surprised to find that they still had a lot of power over me. When I thought I might have found a chance at happiness with Melissa, I gave up on that chance because of the memories of what my ex and Melissa's ex-husband did, about the embarrassment they caused me and, I'm sure, her. I've been on a few dates since then, but it became increasingly clear to me that I never really cared. Melissa, I finally realized, was still in the back of my mind. It was as strong as any thoughts about Reagan and Noah. Although I struck back and got my piece of flesh, I was still not free from them as long as I cared what they might think of anything. Only when I can look at them and laugh, saying, "Look what you gave up and what I have a chance to get as a result. Thank you for being so stupid, I will truly be free." It was then that everything became clear to me and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Picking up the phone, I looked through my recent calls and found the number she called from the day she received the file with Noah's latest adventures. I dialed the number to call back and hoped she would pick up. A moment later, she took it. "Hello, Melissa. This is Trent Gerio. Can we talk for a minute? Trent, you helped me again recently when it wasn't necessary. I'm listening to it. Something came to me this evening. An epiphany, if you will, and if I'm not late and you let me, I'd like to talk to you about this to see if there's a chance I can make a difference." There was silence on the line, although I thought I heard breathing, so I continued. "Even though I recommended that you let go of the past, I realized that I was so focused on the past and what had destroyed my life as I knew it, that I couldn't see that I was looking backwards at things instead of forwards. I want to apologize to you for this, and if you think about it, I would like to have a chance to try to make things right, if you'll let me. Again, she didn't stop me. So when I talked to her that evening, I could practically hear Melissa nodding her head through the line when I realized this. To my relief, she wasn't dating anyone new, and to my surprise, she agreed to let us start over so we could see how things went from there and whether we could eventually become as compatible as we were that first time. Wonderful night. The following weekend, we went on another first date with good and firmly stated intentions to take things slow. But sometimes things have ideas of their own. Although we faced some difficulties in the following months, we found that we agreed on many more important things than we could have imagined, and that many little things really don't matter when two people like each other enough. Although I thought this way after our second casual date, I began to like her more each time we met, and I eventually admitted to myself that it was actually much more than a like almost from the start. Melissa came to the same conclusion, and we began planning and working together so that we could have a future together. This is what we both wanted, so we got married about a year later when we finally decided to try again. When the time came, baby Ansley became our flower girl and Melissa, and I said our I wants together and actually meant it. As I initially feared, we've run into Noah a few times since then, but things haven't gone quite as I initially feared. The first time we came close was when he started making a snide remark to me about taking seconds, but I cut him off. Just above a whisper so only Noah could hear, I said, "Noah, thank you so much for ridding me of Reagan. If you think that she will be more faithful to you than she was to me, then you are even more stupid than I think. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with Melissa, a true gem of a woman who you weren't smart enough to be faithful to and do everything in your power to keep. Trust me, I got the better end of the deal." He almost choked on it and clenched his fists in anger before he realized that I could tear him apart if he hit me. Realizing in time what was happening, and saving both Ansley and himself from severe pain, he turned and walked back to his little daughter. He picked her up and kissed her, whispering something to her before putting her back down and telling Melissa good night. It was a few months later when he let her know that he had been caught up in his own divorce from Reagan, and that he had finally realized that what I had said was true. When he began to talk, she cut him off coldly. "It's a pity that you realized this only after it was too late. Noah, don't ever mention this again." In all the time we've been dating since then, Noah has never said a word about it to me again, but I still see a hint of regret in his eyes when he sees us together. And I always smile. Ansley is 6, and she's currently at her Ortiz grandparents' house, while I'm holding Melissa's hand, and she's squeezing mine like there's no tomorrow. At the doctor's direction, Melissa makes the final push. Finally finished, she leans back, and I kiss her sweat-drenched forehead as the doctor and nurse work at the edge of the delivery bed. The midwife a moment later looks up at us and says, smiling, "Mr. and Mrs. Giro, congratulations. I know you didn't want to know this ahead of time, so let me be the first to tell you that you have a beautiful little boy." And at the same time, all the trials and troubles leading up to this moment were worth it, and I realized that no matter how hard it was, I wouldn't change a thing. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.